Have you ever noticed how many of your choices are not truly yours? You think you are deciding freely, but beneath the surface something silent is steering the wheel. What if the biggest influence on your life isn't what you desire, but what you desperately try to avoid? Imagine a man who dreams of starting his own business, yet every time he takes a step forward, something inside whispers, "Not yet. Wait a little longer. Make sure it's safe." He tells himself it's caution, responsibility, wisdom, but in truth it's fear, disguised, unspoken, unacknowledged, and like an invisible leash, it pulls him back every time he dares to move. Most of us live exactly like this. We do not admit our fears. We call them prudence, realism, or being practical. But let me ask you directly, how many of the choices that shaped your life were made from courage, and how many were made because you were secretly afraid of something? Afraid of rejection, failure, humiliation, loss? Leo Tolstoy once observed that men do not live the lives they truly want, but the lives dictated by the fears they refuse to face. And this is perhaps one of the most tragic realities. The fear you don't admit ends up deciding for you. It chooses your job, your relationships, even your silence in moments when truth is demanded. The real question is not, do I have fears? We all do. The question is, which fears are silently running my life without my consent? Because until you face them, they remain your invisible masters. Take a moment and think, what have you wanted for years but always postponed? Which conversations have you avoided? Which risks have you justified not taking? Behind each of these is a fear you have not yet dared to name. And here is the unsettling truth. Fear thrives in the shadows. The more you deny it, the stronger its grip becomes. But once you bring it into the light, it begins to lose its power. So stay with me, because in this journey we will uncover how hidden fears quietly shape your existence, and how to finally reclaim the authorship of your own story. If you've ever felt stuck, trapped, or mysteriously held back, this message is for you. And before we go deeper, I want you to share in the comments, what do you suspect is the silent fear shaping your life today? And don't forget to like this video and subscribe, because what we're about to explore may change the way you see your own choices forever. What if, instead of fear deciding for you, you could stand face to face with it and still move forward? Picture for a moment what your life might look like if fear were no longer the hidden ruler behind your choices. Imagine the same man who longed to start his own business. This time he hears the same inner whisper, "Wait, it's too risky, you're not ready." But instead of obeying it, he recognizes it. That's fear speaking. And then he acts anyway, not recklessly, but with awareness. He chooses to build, to risk, to step into the unknown. His fear doesn't vanish, it never does, but it no longer commands him. Now bring this closer to your own life. What doors would open if fear weren't quietly closing them for you? Which words would you finally speak to your partner, your parents, your friends? What projects would you finally dare to attempt? How much freer would your relationships feel if they weren't built around avoiding discomfort? Most of us live in a cage whose bars we cannot see. The lock is made of our own silence. Fear says, "Don't try, you'll fail." And we obey. "Don't speak, you'll be judged." And we remain quiet. "Don't move, you'll lose what you have." And so we settle for less than what we could become. But here's the striking possibility. What if every fear you've ever avoided is actually the doorway to your growth? What if fear isn't a stop sign, but a signal pointing to the exact place where life is inviting you to expand? Think about it. The moment you confront a fear, say, speaking in public, you don't just gain the ability to give a speech. You gain courage. You expand your sense of self. You become larger than the fear that once defined you. Now let me ask you, if you lived 1 year choosing courage instead of avoidance, how different would your life look 12 months from now? How many regrets would you prevent? How many opportunities would no longer slip through your fingers? This is the picture I want you to hold as we move forward. Fear does not need to be eliminated for you to live fully. It only needs to lose its throne. And the moment you stop pretending you're not afraid and start walking with fear instead of under it, you begin to taste real freedom. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of the time, fear doesn't show up wearing its real name. It hides under masks we find acceptable. We rarely say, "I'm afraid." Instead, we say, "I'm being realistic. I'm waiting for the right moment. I'm protecting myself." These words sound wise, but often they are nothing more than fear wearing the costume of reason. Think of how often people delay pursuing what matters most because of this disguise. They tell themselves, "It's not the right season yet," but years pass. Or they claim, "I don't want to ruin what I already have." But deep inside, they are terrified of loss, not preserving wisdom. In reality, very few of our excuses are born from pure logic. Most are born from unacknowledged fear. And this is where the illusion becomes dangerous. Because if you believe your fear is prudence, you will defend it, justify it, even feel proud of it. Fear becomes your silent ally while secretly robbing you of life itself. Here's the disruptive thought. What if the majority of your responsible decisions were actually made by fear, not by freedom? What if fear, not wisdom, has been the author of your so-called sensible path? This is why Tolstoy's observation is so piercing. He reminds us that people often surrender their lives not because of dramatic failures, but because of subtle avoidance. A man doesn't live truthfully when he avoids war, but also when he avoids confession, confrontation, or love. A woman doesn't fail only when she loses, but also when she never tries, when she lets fear dictate the silent no behind every decision. It's a sobering realization. You don't need to collapse in disaster to be ruled by fear. You only need to live small, safe, untouched. You only need to allow fear to shrink the horizons of your life without you even noticing. So the true rupture is this. Fear doesn't need to destroy you in order to control you. It only needs to persuade you to avoid what matters most. And the most dangerous fears are not the ones you feel, but the ones you deny. Ask yourself now, where might fear be disguising itself in your life? Which rational justifications could be, in truth, fear whispering in your ear? Until you answer that honestly, you will never truly know who is making your choices, you or your unspoken fears. Tolstoy, one of the greatest observers of the human soul, once wrote that the strongest warriors are these two, time and patience. But hidden in his novels is another silent recognition, that fear is often the unseen enemy shaping our destiny. In Anna Karenina, characters avoid truth and pursue illusions, not because they don't know better, but because they are afraid. Afraid of scandal, of rejection, of facing themselves. And through this, Tolstoy shows us how entire lives can be dismantled, not by external storms, but by the inner cowardice of the heart. Psychology confirms this insight. Viktor Frankl, survivor of the concentration camps and founder of logotherapy, noted that when fear is not confronted, it often mutates into suffering without meaning. People may call it stress, burnout, or unhappiness, but beneath these modern words often lies a primal reality. Fear unchecked becomes the silent architecture of despair. Even St. Thomas Aquinas, centuries earlier, taught that fear is not inherently evil, it is a natural passion, warning us of danger. But when fear ceases to serve us and begins to govern us, it corrupts the will. It bends our choices away from the good, not by force, but by seduction. This is why unacknowledged fear is so perilous. It does not shout, it whispers. Think of your own life in light of these voices. Literature, philosophy, and psychology converge on the same point. Fear, if left unnamed, rules silently. It makes us passive in the face of injustice. It convinces us to remain silent when truth demands a voice. It keeps us in jobs that suffocate us and in relationships that starve our souls. Now, this is not a condemnation. It is an invitation. Because once you recognize that fear has a seat at your table, you can finally decide whether it deserves to stay. What Tolstoy, Frankl, and Aquinas give us is not just analysis, but also courage. They remind us that human beings are capable of more than surrender. So pause for a moment. Do you see how fear is not simply an emotion, but a philosophy of life? One that can quietly take over your existence? The real task is not to eliminate fear, but to displace it from the throne it has claimed in your heart. Only then can your decisions begin to flow from truth rather than avoidance. Fear rarely announces itself directly. Instead, It shapes our behavior through patterns so subtle that we hardly notice them. Let's uncover a few of these hidden dynamics, because once you name them, you begin to loosen their grip. The first invisible pattern is avoidance disguised as wisdom. You tell yourself, it's not the right moment. You wait for conditions to be perfect before you take the step. But perfection never comes, and years pass in the waiting. Fear wins not by stopping you violently, but by persuading you to delay until your opportunities vanish. The second pattern is control disguised as responsibility. You micromanage, overthink, and over-prepare, believing you are being diligent. But what you are really doing is trying to control every variable so that fear of failure never materializes. In truth, this only narrows your life, leaving no room for spontaneity, creativity, or genuine growth. The third pattern is silence disguised as peace. You avoid difficult conversations because you don't want conflict. But that silence slowly poisons relationships. Peace is not the absence of confrontation. It is the presence of truth. Fear convinces you otherwise, and so you protect harmony on the surface while sacrificing honesty underneath. Do you recognize yourself in any of these? These are not extraordinary mistakes. They are the ordinary habits of countless people. That's why they are so dangerous. They appear normal, even virtuous. But look closer, and you'll see they all serve the same master: unacknowledged fear. The tragedy is that these patterns slowly build a life that feels smaller than the one you longed for. You don't notice it day by day, but over years, you wake up realizing that you have been shaped more by avoidance than by courage. And this realization is not only painful, it is deeply sobering. Yet, here lies the power. Once you identify the pattern, you can break it. Awareness is the first strike against fear's hidden rule. The moment you can say, this delay is fear, this silence is fear, this over-control is fear, you begin to reclaim authorship. Fear loses its camouflage. Now I invite you to pause and ask yourself, which of these patterns most resembles your own life? Where has fear been hiding behind noble-sounding excuses? Be brutally honest, because the invisible enemy can only be defeated once it is exposed to the light. Fear has many faces, but one truth. It rules most strongly where it is most denied. You don't conquer fear by eliminating it. You conquer it by refusing to let it dictate your choices. Every time you say, not now, when your heart whispers yes, fear grows stronger. Fear thrives in the shadows of excuses. The moment you name it, it begins to lose its power. The greatest tragedy is not being defeated by fear. It is never realizing it was the one writing your story all along. Listen carefully. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing truth while fear still whispers its threats. Many people live small, not because they lack opportunities, but because they let fear convince them their cage is safety. Your life will either be authored by fear or by love. There is no neutral ground. The risk you avoid today may become the regret that haunts you tomorrow. The fear you refuse to face today will quietly shape who you become in 10 years. Now pause and let these words echo. Which of them pierced you the most? Which sentence felt uncomfortably close to your reality? Often, the line that unsettles you most is the mirror you most need to face. These are not motivational slogans. They are confrontations. They are truths distilled from centuries of human struggle, from Tolstoy's novels to Frankl's therapy rooms, from Aquinas's philosophy to your very life. And they all converge on one principle. Until you decide to expose fear, it will remain the hidden architect of your existence. So, here's the challenge. Take one of these sentences, write it down, and carry it with you this week. Let it interrupt you when you start making excuses. Let it question you when you begin to avoid. Let it remind you that fear only rules when you consent to its silence. Because sometimes all it takes to change the course of a life is a single line that refuses to leave your mind. And perhaps today, one of these lines was written for you. Here's a paradox that at first feels contradictory. The more you try to avoid fear, the more enslaved you become to it. Yet the more you accept fear and move through it, the freer you become. Think about it. When you try to build a life where you never feel afraid, you shrink your world to only what feels safe. You avoid risks, difficult conversations, uncertain paths. At first, this feels like control. But over time, your world becomes smaller, narrower, almost suffocating. You are safe, but you are not alive. Now imagine the opposite. You walk into situations that scare you. You give the speech, you make the confession, you take the risk. Your heart races, your hands tremble, but you refuse to retreat. The strange thing is this. Fear is still there, but after you pass through it, you discover a freedom that was impossible before. Your world expands instead of shrinking. Here lies the paradox. Fear promises safety but delivers captivity. Courage accepts danger but delivers liberation. Dostoevsky understood this deeply. In his novels, the characters who try to escape suffering end up most enslaved by it, while those who embrace the burden of truth, even at great cost, find a strange and profound freedom. The path to life always passes through fear, not around it. And isn't this the same in your own experience? Think of the moments when you avoided fear. Did you feel free, or did you feel smaller? Now recall the moments when you confronted fear. Did you not walk away stronger, larger, more alive, even if the outcome was uncertain? This is why fear is not your greatest enemy. Your greatest enemy is avoidance. Avoidance is the poison that slowly drains meaning from your life while convincing you it is protecting you. So here is the paradox to meditate on. If you want safety above all, you will end up living afraid. But if you are willing to face fear, you will find the only true safety there is, the freedom of a life lived authentically. Ask yourself now, which kind of safety are you chasing, the cage or the freedom? Because the answer to that question might reveal why you feel stuck and what you must do next. What happens when you stop letting fear decide for you? The reward is not only external success, though sometimes it includes that. The real reward is inner transformation. You become a different kind of person. When you face fear, you gain integrity. You are no longer split between what you want and what you actually do. Your actions begin to align with your deeper values, and that alignment brings peace far deeper than comfort ever could. When you face fear, you gain courage. Courage is not something you wait for. It is something you build like a muscle. Each time you act despite fear, you become stronger, more resilient, more capable of carrying life's weight. Fear shrinks and you expand. When you face fear, you gain freedom. The invisible chains that once dictated your behavior begin to fall away. You realize you can survive rejection, failure, embarrassment. And once you discover that, the world opens in ways you never thought possible. And there is one more reward, perhaps the most profound. When you face fear, you gain love, because fear makes you self-protective, closed, calculating. But when you are no longer ruled by it, you are able to give yourself more fully to others. You listen more honestly, you speak more truthfully, you love more courageously. This is why Tolstoy's warning matters so much. A life ruled by fear is not just a smaller life, it is a loveless one. And a life liberated from fear, though marked by struggle, is filled with meaning, connection, and dignity. So ask yourself, what is the personal reward waiting for you on the other side of the fear you've been avoiding? Is it a career you've been too hesitant to pursue? A relationship that needs truth instead of silence? A part of yourself you've been too cautious to express? The prize is not guaranteed comfort. It never is. The prize is becoming more fully human, more deeply alive. And isn't that what you have always wanted? Not simply to survive, but to live a life that feels undeniably your own? The fear you refuse to face is the exact place where your next transformation waits. The question is, will you choose the cage of safety or the path of expansion? The answer will shape not only what you do, but who you are becoming. To bring everything together, let's look at fear through a clear framework that combines philosophy, psychology, and lived experience. Think of fear as operating on 3 levels, each deeper than the last. The first level is biological fear. This is natural, even good. Your body reacts to threats with adrenaline, racing heart, heightened senses. This fear protects your survival. It tells you to jump back when a car speeds by or to be cautious near fire. No problem here. The second level is psychological fear. This is where most of us struggle. It is not about real danger, but about imagined scenarios. What if I fail? What if they reject me? What if I lose everything? This fear still triggers the same physical response, but the danger is not outside. It is inside your mind. And yet these imagined threats shape your decisions more than actual risks ever do. The third and deepest level is existential fear. This is the fear Tolstoy exposes in his novels. Fear of meaninglessness, of being unloved, of living a wasted life. It is not about physical danger, but about the soul's hunger for truth, love, and purpose. This fear often hides behind the others, but it is the most powerful. Because when left unexamined, it can dictate an entire existence of avoidance. Here's the key insight. While you cannot eliminate fear from any of these levels, you can choose how to respond to it. And your response determines your character. St. Thomas Aquinas would say that virtues are built precisely in these moments of tension, when your passions pull you one way, but your will directs you toward the good. Viktor Frankl would add that in choosing your response, you find meaning even in suffering. And Dostoevsky would insist that through facing fear you discover the truth about yourself. And only in truth can you find freedom. So fear is not just an enemy to defeat, it is also a teacher. It reveals what you value, what you long for, what you most deeply need to confront. Fear points toward the very areas where your growth is waiting. If you understand this framework, biological, psychological, existential, you will begin to see your fears differently. Not as random obstacles, but as signals. Each fear, properly named, is an invitation to courage, to meaning, to becoming more fully human. The question that remains is, will you accept the invitation or continue to let fear decide for you in silence? So here we are. The fear you don't admit has been secretly shaping your life. It whispers behind excuses. It hides behind prudence. It wears the mask of responsibility. And if left unnamed, it will keep choosing for you. Choosing silence over truth, safety over love, survival over meaning. But you are not condemned to this. You have a choice. You can begin today to face the fears that have ruled you in secret. Not by waiting for them to vanish, but by naming them, by stepping into them, by refusing to let them write the story of your life. Tolstoy showed us, through the tragic lives of his characters, what happens when fear is denied. People shrink, relationships wither, destinies are wasted. Frankl reminded us that even in the darkest suffering, meaning is possible when we choose courage over avoidance. And Aquinas taught that fear is not sin in itself, but surrendering to it can turn us away from the good we are called to pursue. So let me ask you personally, which fear has been secretly ruling your choices? The fear of failure? The fear of rejection? The fear of being truly seen? Until you face it, it will continue to govern your life in silence. But the moment you acknowledge it, the throne it has occupied begins to crumble. Imagine looking back 10 years from now. Which will hurt more, that you tried and failed or that you never tried at all? Which regret would you rather carry, the scars of courage or the emptiness of avoidance? The invitation is simple but demanding. Name your fear, speak it aloud, write it down, share it with someone you trust. And then take one step, not 10, not 100, just one, directly into the place it has been forbidding you to go. That step may be small in the world's eyes, but in the landscape of your soul, it is revolutionary. Now, I want to hear from you. In the comments, write down the fear you suspect has been silently directing your life. Don't be vague. Be honest. You may find that in naming it, you've already begun to weaken it. And if this reflection spoke to you, like this video and subscribe to the channel. Because here, we will keep exploring what truly matters. Not the illusions of comfort, but the path to character, freedom, and authentic life. Your fear has ruled long enough. It's time to step out of its shadow and into the truth of who you were meant to be.